I heard recording in progress. Did anyone else hear that? Great, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to read out this intro because I don't want to make a mistake with this, so I'm just going to sort of start reading it. So it feels especially important that we are having this discussion now. Only days ago, the Home Secretary announced significant changes to the asylum system, reducing refugee status to 30 months, introducing repeated reviews of protection, extending the wait for settlement, and keeping family reunion paused. These measures are framed as administrative reform, but for the women we work with, they translate into something much more personal: prolonged uncertainty about whether they will be allowed to stay safe. At MEWSo, we see daily how immigration policy shapes women's lives in very practical ways. It affects whether a woman feels secure enough to report abuse, whether she can access stable housing, whether she can plan for her children's education, and whether she can begin to recover from trauma. Many migrants and refugee women have survived sexual violence, trafficking, domestic abuse, and conflict. Being told that their safety will be reassessed every 30 months, that they must repeatedly prove their fear, risks compounding their trauma rather than supporting recovery. Temporary status creates long-term instability. This conference was designed to explore exactly these connections: how immigration systems, housing policy, welfare structures, and racism can intensify harm for migrant women. But it is also about something else: resilience and collective strength. The women we work alongside are not defined by vulnerability alone. They are organisers, leaders, advocates, and community builders. They challenge injustice not only through protest, but through everyday acts of care and solidarity. At a time when the public debate around asylum can feel increasingly divisive, we want to ground today in dignity, fairness, and lived experience. Our lives are not border policy, and as we listen to our speakers and to one another, we hold into a simple principle: safety should not be conditional, and compassion should not be controversial. So as we start this conference, I'd like to hand over to Halaleh just for 5 minutes. Halaleh Taheri, the founder of MEWSo, so that she can say a few words at the beginning. Halaleh.
Thank you, Audrey. And thank you, everybody. Hello to all of you. I'm honored to be here today with all of you. I would like to thank our speakers as well for accepting our invitation. And thanks to all of you that you are with us today about the most important but most pressing humanitarian issue in the current situation in our region. I would like to open the conference by dedicating a few minutes to reflecting on the global issue, global situation of women and women's rights, the impact of war, and the rising threat from fascism. I start with Iran. I know that all of you see the news on the Iran. Iran is on the verge of a very dangerous and dark scenario that not only affects Iran, but is already impacting the entire Middle East. The condition for living and sustaining life for ordinary people are becoming increasingly impossible. Gaza still is bleeding from a devastating genocide, and now another destructive mass killing in Iran. Across the region, civilians continue to suffer the consequences of escalating violence and instability. The United States and Israel, with their own objectives, are aiming to completely reshape the Middle East, and in general, to make ordinary civilians' life impossible What is happening under the name of the fight against terrorism in Iran is not a war of the people of their choice. Unfortunately, people are being used as targets and tools to achieve these goals. In this situation, the people are simply the victims. So far, thousands of innocent people in Iran have been killed in the last 2 weeks. Today, it was reported that oil facilities, oil, petrol, and petrol fabrics in Iran have been destroyed, and major shopping centers and petrol stations have been set on fire. This means ruin and misery for ordinary people for many, many years, not the creation of the democracy that they are promising all the time for Middle East. In this situation, the people are simply victims. So far, we know that for 47 years, the people of Iran have been fighting against the Islamic regime. It's difficult to find another nation like the Iranian people, especially the Women Life Freedom that you all know about, that Women Life Freedom movement that has sacrificed so much for freedom. The people of Iran want to achieve their dreams on their own terms. For example, through a council of state empowered by the working class and progressive movement, including women's movement, rather than through a monarchy or other alternative imposed from outside, including by the US. The plan that some powers, such as US, Israel, and Pahlavi monarchy, have for Iran regime change in order to create a government in their own image is deeply destroyed people's lives and completely wrong. We are also facing another issue on the international stage, the rise of fascism, which in all its form is starting to take root in governmental regimes and extremist groups. This is a global threat to all humanity, especially to the most marginalized parts of society, workers, the poor, women, migrants, and people with disabilities, whose lives will become much harder as their rise takes hold. This is a great threat to the entire planet. Therefore, on the Women's Day, it's our duty as the women's movement, activists, feminists, freedom fighters, freedom lovers, and humanitarians to stand against the fascism, assault, against the anti-imperialist war, and all the war that is happening right now. We must stand up, we must protect, and we must raise our voices in unity. I would also like to share the tragic news of the killing of my dearest, my comrade Yanar Mohammed, a socialist and feminist activist from Iraq who dedicated her life to supporting and protecting oppressed women in Iraq. She was an important voice in the international struggle for women's liberation. Sadly, she was killed last week in her home in Baghdad by an Islamic terrorist group. This means a sign for all women activists to understand that what's happening and what is the women's movement in such a situation. Her death reminds us of the dangers women activists continue to face. I offer my deepest condolences to her family, loved ones, and the movement she was part of that. I would now like to ask you to join me in a moment of silence for Yanar Mohammed and for all the women and protesters who have lost their lives in the struggle for freedom and equality, and most important in this day, for thousands of people who have been killed in Gaza and Iran.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're going to start now. We're a few minutes behind, but we'll start with Zrinka. So I'm just going to introduce her. Zrinka Bralo, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is CEO of Migrants Organise, an organisation, a platform for migrant justice, which has launched the National Solidarity Knows No Borders grassroots movement. She's originally from Sarajevo, where she was a journalist and worked with international war correspondents during the 90s siege. She came to the UK in 1993 and as a refugee has been organising for migrants and refugee justice ever since. I understand that Zrinka is going to talk about building safety, not borders, women resisting the hostile environment. Thank you, Zrinka.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me today and for organizing this event. It's really nice to be with comrades in these uncertain and troubled times. I also want to begin with where we are in the world and remember Iran and Gaza and Lebanon and Sudan and Congo and Ukraine and Afghanistan and many more places in the world, but also people being hunted by immigration paramilitary forces on the streets of the US, on our streets to some extent, and also people who are suffering in silence in super rich homes, our domestic workers trapped by their employers in immigration-induced slavery. So I just want to acknowledge that we carry all those people into this virtual room with us today. And also I want to send my solidarity and courage to all of you who have family and friends in places that are not safe right now. And I wish you all the best. As you've heard, I am a survivor of the siege of Sarajevo, which lasted for 4 years, 1,425 days. And it's still considered to be the longest siege of the capital city in the history of warfare. And I'm a survivor also of the UK immigration system, which refused me protection when I came out in the middle of that war and just a few months before genocide happened in my country. During the war in Bosnia, more than 50,000 women and girls survived systemic rape. And it was their courage and of those who survived those notorious rape camps that changed the global law, forcing the international community to recognize sexual violence not just as a collateral damage, but as a deliberate weapon of war and prosecutable crime against humanity. So I know to a large extent in my bones the difference between a system that has failed and a system that is working exactly as intended. So today I want to talk about this second one. And the question that's posed to me, that's not rhetorical, but it's a real question. It's a very dangerous question for many of us, which is the famous "where are you from?" or "what is your immigration status?" question. Because the answer to that cold administrative question decides not only where we can stay, but also whether we can be safe, get healthcare, or be believed. And it also decides whether people who are hurting women in particular know that they can keep hurting women and exploiting women. And institutions that should be protecting us instead report us or deny us safety or care or dignity of a human being. And these two questions are the ways of othering people and dehumanizing us, because the underlying question is, why are you here? And I just wanted to remind us today, Alay Sivanandan's answer to that question, which is, we're here because you were there. We're told again and again that Britain's immigration system is broken. And I want to offer a more uncomfortable analysis. System is actually not broken. It is working. It's called the hostile environment, and that's the name given to it by Theresa May. And we should honor that honesty, because this is the system. It is designed to make people's lives difficult, so precarious, so full of fear that they would go away, or as she said, self-deport, or stay and suffer in silence. And the truth is that this is not, this is the system that is doing exactly what it's designed to do. And if we diagnose the problem wrongly, then all our solutions will be wrong. So thinking about migrant and refugee women especially, this makes us vulnerable to the state that is hostile. And it's that that hostility then and vulnerability extended to anyone who wants to use it against women in precarious position. So, you know, no recourse to public funds. It's the 4 words that say you are here, but you are not here. You may be abused, but you cannot escape because leaving requires money and you don't have that money and you can't access a refuge. And colleagues here who are on the front line of care in domestic abuse know how perpetrators learn the language of hostile environments. So they use it with precision. If you report me, they will deport you. Your visa is tied to me and no one will believe you. So they don't have to be genius. They just need to read headlines and what Home Office is proudly saying about how easily it is to exploit and abuse people. So this is structural abuse. So it's not an accident. So it's not one man or few men or particularly bad employer. It's the system that gives them a weapon and asks women to prove that they were harmed. And the hostile environment didn't come out of nowhere. It has a long history before Theresa May in 2012. And what she changed is that she just stopped pretending that Britain has a long tradition of welcoming people. So this architecture has been laid by the empire of borders drawn for profit and people assigned to categories and territories of belonging and unbelonging. And this is all for the sake of profit. Some lives are worth more than others. And we have seen with Windrush scandal what that means in practice. So it's people who lived here for 50 years, you were told that they don't belong. They're denied cancer treatment, detained, deported. And of course, the first woman who spoke out about it was Paulette Wilson. It was a woman who had to speak out. And she lost her job and she was a cook in the House of Commons. With no irony, she spent 50 years feeding members of parliament who then denied her dignity at the end of her life. And she died without getting her compensation. And more than 50,000 people have been affected by Windrush, but only around 8 came forward. And 4,700 of them are women. So disproportionately, again, affected women. And this is how dehumanization works. And I know this, it starts quietly, long before violence becomes visible. It starts with paperwork, with categories, and it's then dispersed into all systems in our society. And then very quickly, where dignity is gone and no one's believed. I grew up in Sarajevo, in a country that no longer exists, and I lived through the siege and genocide, and through dissolution of everything that I knew as my life and my home. And my country was a colony until the First World War. So I know about empires that transported millions of people across oceans in chains. And today, when people move across those same oceans in search of safety and survival, they're treated not as human beings shaped by that history, but as a crisis to be contained. We're somehow always some kind of threat. And then when we arrive here, we're met with hostile environment. So this is what I call the politics of this belief. So the narrative is created that we try with facts, we try with stories, but it's not working. People are just not believed because they're assigned this category. So, and that's because in this country, we don't have immigration policy. We have anti-immigration policies. And we're always asked these questions that are looking for reason why they could reject us and send us back. And the system is always somehow deciding not to believe us. So this is not because we're not telling the truth, but because the system is designed in this way. So this, and it's also because the hostile environment is a racist system. It operates through racist profiling of people who look like they belong and don't belong. So who is asked to show papers and who is waved through? The Winters generation were British, but they were still denied belonging after 50 years. And migrant women today, especially Black and brown women, carry the double weight of immigration system and racist hierarchy. So the landlords will not rent them. The hospital will ask them questions, even when they're giving birth in the hospital. And the police will not respond to the reports of crime and abuse, but ask about visa. So this is all very bleak, and we all know this. But there is also, having done this for more than 30 years, I've seen the resilience of governments that are trying to break people, but also people who refuse to be broken. So all of us at this conference today, and millions of women whose names we will never know because they cannot speak publicly, we have built some extraordinary resilience without resources, without recognition, without the safety that system denied us. Women, we know women who went through courts and won without lawyers, and women who built extraordinary networks of mutual support in gaps that state created and enforced hostility that state created. So we have each other, we have housed each other, believed each other when the system refused to do. We have organized, not because it's easy, but we didn't have choice. There was no alternative. And at Migrants Organise, we've learned that over 3 decades that survival is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You can survive alone, but you cannot win alone. So the hostile environment is designed to drain us, to isolate us, to separate us from community and resources. And that's what we are fighting against, that isolation through solidarity. And I mean real solidarity, the kind that costs some things, because we need to reach out and find courage to reach out to people who are not yet in the room and build relationships, and that takes time. And that's the answer to the system built on divide and rule. Women have always been at the heart of this work. Usually without any credit, women organize the food kitchens, the rapid response network, the anti-deportation campaigns, the legal education, the mutual aid and anti-eviction campaigns. And the far right knows this. It is fighting for the hearts of minds of working class women right now. And our answer cannot be to tell those women that they're wrong and to feel the pain. So we also need to reach out and build power alongside them. I survived Sarajevo because people organized, not because any cavalry arrived. And that's what's going to happen. It's happened in Gaza, it's happening in Lebanon, and it's going to happen in Iran, because neighbors will make decisions every morning to keep each other alive once the world decided that we were expendable. And that knowledge is what I carry into this work. And it is what I see when I look at the women in this movement, people who have made same decision in circumstances the world would rather not look at. So this is not a wish. This is a demand for a system that does not use immigration status as a weapon against women it should be protecting. And we want no recourse to public funds lifted for everyone, not reformed, not made slightly less punishing, but ended. We want an asylum system that begins from the presumption that women are telling the truth about their own lives, not the presumption that they're trying to game a system. We want the hostile environment repealed in full, not managed more humanely, just ended. We want recognition, formal, legal, institutional recognition that a woman fleeing violence then does not become less real because she crossed a line on a map, that her humanity is not conditional or her dignity or safety. And I want this gathering this morning to be part of building that movement that makes this possible, not by asking for permission, but by building power, by going to the people not yet into the room, by doing the slow, stubborn, relational work of organizing to join Solidarity Knows No Borders community and newly formed anti-racist movement to organize for a safer and just world. The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily make differently, said Professor David Graeber. So the hostile environment was made and can be unmade. It's not normal. It's not natural. And it is the women on this call and in this movement who will be the ones who will unmake it. So I have hope, not as a feeling of optimism to help me survive. I have been doing this too long to survive uncomfortable feelings or comforting feelings. I mean hope as a verb, as Mariama Kaba defined it, as a practice, as a decision made every morning to organize another day, to build another relationship of solidarity, to refuse to normalize hostility and hate, and the story that tells us nothing can change because our lives are boundless. There are ours to be lived, and systems should be there to serve and enable us to do it in safety, dignity, and freedom. So thank you for having me today. And as Madiba said, it always seems impossible until it's done.
Thank you, Zrinka. That was lovely and very informative too.
Thank you.
So now we're still a little bit behind, but I think we're okay. I'd like to introduce Eiri. I hope I'm saying that right. Eiri Ohtani. She is director of Right to Remain, an anchor organisation for the migration justice movement in the UK. Through the unique combination of public legal education, strategic convening, and lived experience-led campaigning and organising that encourages hundreds of groups across the UK, Right to Remain builds knowledge, radical solidarity, and power of our community of people seeking asylum, refugees, migrants, and their allies. Eiri has over 20 years experience in the refugee and migrant sector, covering a wide range of roles at the national, European and international levels. In the UK, she previously set up and led the charity Asylum Support Appeal Project and the coalition, the Detention Forum. Her topic today is Victims or Leaders, the role of women in fighting against the hostile environment in the UK. Thank you, Eiri. Am I saying your name correctly?
It's fine. My name is Eiri.
I'm so sorry.
People are calling my name. Don't worry about it. Thank you for lovely introduction to me. My name is Eiri. I'm director of Right to Remain. I'm going to be speaking about, obviously, women and women's role in the fight against the hostile environment. Quite similar to what Zrinka has said, and also building on what Audrey and Halaleh, you mentioned of the current situation that is unfolding in front of us, which is not looking great. But if it's okay, I'm going to be sharing some slides. I'm going to be struggling a little bit to put that on, so just give me 1 second.
You have
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. With the announcements made by the Home Secretary last week, I am pretty sure people are feeling quite anxious and maybe angry, if I may say so. And I do think that the International Women's Day came at a very poignant point. I felt quite confused, to be honest, because I saw so many parties, events, marches, and demonstrations, and we are still calling for basic things: justice, safety, and equality, because they're not protected, as we have already heard. But another reason why I felt quite ambivalent about the International Women's Day was because there are so many women who couldn't be part of the celebration. People who lost their lives through many violences that have been taking place all over the world. Here in the UK, I was thinking about, I think as Zrinka referred to, perhaps domestic working women who are trapped, women who are struggling because they can't access any public funds, and also, in our case, particularly poignantly, women who are currently detained in immigration detention centers, which I want to talk a little bit today. But before that, for those of you who don't know about Right to Remain, we are a charity. As it's been introduced, we do public legal education, strategic convening, and also campaigning and organizing. But we do not give legal advice, so that is one thing I just want to mention as an important point. We do talk a lot about solidarity, and I think that is a very important concept, not just today, but every day. And I think for us, what's really important is that we want to kind of go beyond this sensation that, okay, we are all working towards justice and you're not alone, I'm with you. I think, or we think, that we have to be really thinking about why is this injustice happening and what can we do to challenge that. So I think that is a definition of solidarity or radical solidarity. So as I said today, I like to use my voice today to draw attention to one group of women, one group of many women who weren't part of the celebration yesterday, which are migrant and asylum-seeking women who are held in immigration detention center. And particularly, I want to talk about our own experiences of fighting against detention and fighting against this very direct form of violence. And this is state violence. We often talk about sexual violence and other types of violence in the context of women's rights. We really need to be talking about the violence that is committed by our governments, that is committed by the states, and that is the essence of the hostile environment. I want to talk about Darwin-side Immigration Detention Center, and I don't really know how many of you have been paying much attention to what's happening to this very remote detention center that is based in County Durham. We have been working with a very small but powerful group of women called the No to Hassockfield Campaign Group. And here is a clip. I'm not going to show you the clip, but they issued yesterday. This is our friend Emma, who has been campaigning for closure of the detention center, explaining that there are women behind in that brown building who have been held indefinitely and who could not come out to be with them to celebrate the International Women's Day. It's a very new center, by the way. It only opened in 2021. It has got 84 bed places, and on average, 25 days is the length of time that the women do spend in this detention center. However, and this really shocked me when I was looking at the statistics, the longest single detention that women detained their experience was 162 days. And that is a hell of a lot of time. And yet, having committed this really great violence, 59% of the women are actually released into the community, which raised the question as to why did they have to be detained in the first place? And this is something that the campaigners we work with, so these are mainly women who are refugee asylum seekers, who are going through the immigration system. They always say, you know, when these people come out of detention centers, broken, harmed, and not being able to just deal with anything because they have been so traumatized, who is there to look after them? Usually women. So this is another example of women supporting women, but in a way that is not acknowledged and that remains silent. Last year, we, as an organization, had a very challenging situation when somebody that we knew was suddenly detained, and we were literally overnight thrown into this big campaign to free Fatu from the detention center. And I just want to tell you a little bit about this story to illustrate how, as women, we fight, and also how, as women, we grew in our power through fighting together. So one day, Fatu went to report. Many of you probably do know that as an immigrant who have got insecure immigration status, you are often required to report to the Home Office regularly. Fatu has been doing this for years, but on that day, she was actually detained. Her friend, another migrant woman, realized that she never came out of the reporting center. So that's when the alarm started. Immediately, because we are working with many other women's groups across the UK, the No to Hassockfield group actually stepped in to help. So on your left, you see the picture from the demonstration they held outside the Darwinwood Detention Center, because Fatu, after having been detained in Liverpool, was moved to a small detention center in Manchester. And then from there, she was moved to Darwinside. And because we knew each other, because we worked together before, they were able to quickly gather together to demonstrate. And not only that, they managed to stop the van that was trying to take Fatu from this detention center to Yarlswood. Now, the reason why this was significant is that way we gained extra time to find a solicitor. We gained extra time to make sure her removal was stopped for the time being. I say stopped because during this course of ordeal, Fatu actually received 3 removal orders. And it was such a hellish experience for all of us. But I mentioned about the strength of other women who knew her, who are migrant women. So on your right-hand side, you see a group of women based in Liverpool who actually organized a march throughout the Liverpool town centre demanding Fatu's release. And it was a very difficult time, but we were able to, through shared stories of experiences and also shared pain, organize every day demanding Fatu's release. So we also organized an event in Newcastle, which is near the detention center, again calling for Fatu's release. So this is a scene from the event organized with the campaigners who are called These Walls Must Fall. So they have been campaigning against reporting, against detention, against deportation, and on this occasion, for one of them. It is really important to be speaking outwards. Because of the very difficult situation we are in, we tend to shrink away from the world. But the decision was made that we do need to be getting more people interested in Fatu's plight. And to be honest, when we started this petition, we weren't quite sure how many people would sign. But in the end, we got over 26,000 signatures. And that gave such a huge sense of support and solidarity, not just for people who are campaigning, but also for Fatu herself. Because we are always able to tell her, look, we now have got 1,000 signatures. We now have got 2,000 signatures. And we did that despite skepticism, shall we say. We don't particularly always want to talk about difficult things that do happen to us. And it was a real challenge for us to step back to say, no, we do need to be telling the world that this is happening. Because if you're not telling the world, nothing is going to change. And eventually, after many removal directions, and one of us literally speaking to Fatu, who was just about to be taken to the airplane in the airport, she was released. She was released back into the community. And this is when we received her back in Liverpool. But the story doesn't actually end there. Fatu then became a campaigner herself. When Fatu was detained, she was always telling us, look, this is very difficult for me. My mental health is suffering, but I do need to speak for other women who are also in downside. So she started coming to our events to share her experiences. So this is the event we organized in Manchester, solidarity event. And you can probably see her, I think there she is. She is standing behind the banner. We say no one is illegal. She came to be with us. And not only that, when we organized a national demonstration against detention outside Darwin-side detention center in October, she was one of the speakers. She had courage to come to the place where she was detained and speak to the world and demand the end to detention and also demand the end to, obviously, detention center itself. So there she is holding the banner. And just last month, she was also a guest of honor for us at the events, helping us to understand what it means to be detained, what it feels like to be detained, but also what we should be doing together. I think this teaches us a lesson. And it wasn't just about Fatu. As a group, as Right to Remain, as These Walls Must Fall, I think on reflection, we were really transformed ourselves because we went through this together. And we learned so much about what we should be doing, how we should be fighting. And this topic is actually becoming, unfortunately, increasingly salient. We do know that the government plan is to make it harder and harder for people to settle, which means that there will be more people who are going to be asked to report. The government has already reopened one of the detention centers, which was closed about 7 years ago. They're getting ready to detain more people. So that means that we need to be prepared. We need to be able to protect ourselves as much as possible. So there are a couple of learnings from this experience for us. I just mentioned 3 things. One of them is that whenever we do campaigning, it has to be person-centered. But for that to happen, there needs to be a lot of trust. And I believe that women, people who have been active in this space, have this tremendous ability to be able to connect with other women despite all these barriers. So I do hope that you continue doing that, extending solidarity, extending support, making sure that we are communicating with each other even when it feels very, very difficult. For the campaign, we relied on existing network solidarity, and therefore I am really grateful to be here, and I hope we can connect with more organizations because we do need each other at the time of crisis. And lastly, what we have found really useful was that we have been doing public legal education. So what we mean by that is that we have been explaining to people the system of asylum, system of immigration. We all know that there aren't that many lawyers. We need to be doing our best to make sure that we can secure our immigration status as well as we could. And because we are doing lots of public legal education, including about detention, including about deportation, amongst us, we knew what was going on. We were able to make decisions very, very quickly. So these are the kind of 3 key things that we learned from this experience. I'm just kind of showing you these slides very, very quickly because this is the kind of session that we do run when we invite people to come to the public legal education. So please watch out for future events which are about detention, deportation, because we need to be familiarizing ourselves with many of the things that are taking place. The biggest lesson for us is that fighting together is a transformative experience, and we can be stronger even when things are so bleak and so hostile. And I just want to end what I'm going to say. I'm just going to go to the very end of the slides. As I said to you, we were slightly fearful when we started campaigning, but we had to do that. And what we do know is that we become strong by doing the things you need to be strong for. And this is the way genuine learning takes place. And I do hope that everybody in this room will be able to step up by doing things that might feel uncomfortable, but that's probably the only way we can secure safety. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was really, really instructive. So thank you so much for that. And as we think about that and contemplate that, how to campaign, how to reach out, how to connect with each other, that's something hopefully we can talk about in the little discussion we might have near the end of the conference as well. Thank you for that. We'll swiftly go on to Gisela Valle. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Director of Latin American Women's Rights Service. Gisela has been the director since 2019, working on the intersection of women's, migrants and workers' rights and human rights alongside issues of racial inequalities. Before joining the Latin American Women's Rights Service, she worked in the women's sector in the UK, as well as a researcher on European human rights. Before coming to the UK, she practiced law in Mexico, including working as a legal counsel for local government and as a legal counsel in Mexico's Senate. Her topic of discussion today is the impact of immigration status on safety, well-being, and access to justice. Gisela, I see you there. Great.
I'm here, and thank you for inviting me. So I've been reflecting a little bit as I've been listening to this, and I'm just going to try and frame this slightly different. Thank you for inviting me to this conference, and apologies for the last minute change of tag. So just a little bit about LORS. LORS is an organization that was created in 1983 as a response to the gap in service provision that we identified for Latin American women who were already in the country. But this was done in the context of Black and minoritized women's groups organizing during the 70s and early 80s. A lot of organizations were created to serve specific communities. And in its inception, LORS really was about providing those frontline services that were missing, particularly for survivors of violence against women and girls, but also for women who, through the harm of immigration policies, needed support in integrating into the country. That might be on housing, on accessing welfare benefits for those who have the right, and was complemented later on employment and immigration advice. But in these 40 plus years of existence that LORS has had, one of the things that became very distinct was the need to create a different area of work that addressed the structural and systemic issues that were affecting the women that were coming through our services. So we identified that immigration policies and other policies that excluded migrant women from protection and services really were creating the conditions for them to find themselves in abusive or violent situations, or in situations of labor exploitation and other types of economic exploitation, and then serve to keep them in those situations for longer. So what I'm talking about is, let's say, no recourse to public funds. So no recourse to public funds plus the sponsorship system will make you dependent on your sponsor, which oftentimes is your abuser, to maintain your status and to maintain, roof over your head, food on the table, and so on and so forth. Then you have, if a situation becomes unbearable and you're trying to report this to the police or to contact social services or to contact even the local authorities for housing support, your data is going to be shared with immigration enforcement, which means at the point where things become unbearable, you're going to have to make a really grim calculation. Is it safer for me to stay in a situation where I know harm is already existing, or should I risk it for a different type of harm at the hands of the state? It might be because you're excluded and you might become destitute, or you might be put in a detention center, or because you are going to have immigration enforcement action instead of a police investigating the crime that you're trying to report. Are you going to have immigration enforcement action instead of proper healthcare services that you need in the situation that you're in, and so on and so forth? So we created a strand of work that addressed that through policy advocacy and campaigning work on two main areas that are usually not seen in conjunction, but they're very closely interrelated, which is violence against women and girls and labor exploitation. We know and we talk a lot about the harm of no recourse to public funds in terms of violence against women and girls, but we don't really discuss a lot how a lot of these policies are geared towards leaving migrants in a situations that are ripe for exploitation, and to keep those exploited in those situations for far longer, because they're not going to have any avenue of redress either. Labor protection laws will not be enforceable to them because they can't come forward and report them. And even in situations where you have severe labor exploitation, including modern slavery and trafficking, the protections afforded to you are also not going to be sufficient to enable you to safely escape that situation. So we know that for migrant survivors of violence against women and girls, you're going to have dual harms, as was discussed before. So you're going to have the harm at the hands of private individuals, being organized or not, depending on the situation. And then you're going to have the harm that comes from the state if you try to do anything about that. But instead of just focusing on that and, thinking a little bit about the white paper context, I think in the context of this conference, we need to talk about how migration is used not only as a rallying cry for people who are disaffected with their own personal situation and with the situation in the country, but really as a coverall for successive government decisions that have hollowed out, for example, state services, state protections, that have mishandled, economic growth and other things. And just thinking a little bit about why do we put these women in harm's way to be able to deny that 15 years plus of austerity have really hollowed out services, for the entirety of the community, not only the migrant community, or that the increases in migration that we have seen in recent years were the result of governments understanding that bringing migrants into the country to fill out specific needs of specific sectors of the economy was a very cheap measure. But at the same time, it's a measure that allows them to deny how systems have not been put in place in order to address the needs of this sector. And I've been reflecting a lot about this because we tend to think about, the issues of how migrants are treated in this country without understanding how the treatment of migrants in this country might help support a narrative where you can have, again, austerity for over a decade and a half, and yet create a group that's easily presented as a scapegoat. So it's not that we have defunded services, it's really that we have so many migrants that services are not able to cope. In reality, there's a very clear narrative of what happens when you start slashing budgets consistently for healthcare services, for social care services, and so on and so forth. And then you say, okay, but this is not because we did that. This is because these other people who we brought into the country, so we can very easily give them employment conditions that would not be acceptable by the native population, to supplement areas of the economy that we also didn't support. And the reason why I've been thinking about this is because I agree that we need to organize. But I think in the organizing, I think we need to hold the government and authorities accountable for the decisions that they've made, including the adoption of far-right narratives that help cover up the deficiencies in decision-making that have led to the situation being what it is. I'm really in a bad moment, I think, with the immigration white paper, with some of the reforms that are coming forward. I was in a meeting last week when I said, look, it worries me, the fact that a lot of these reforms have been put together really quickly and have been brought forward really very quickly, except the one line in the immigration white paper that says that domestic abuse survivors are going to be protected. And I was generally asking the question, so what can we do in order to hold the government accountable for their own promise in a really terrible document? So I'm not suggesting the upholding of the immigration white paper. I think it needs to be scrapped entirely. But it's really interesting to me how the government feels very accountable for everything else in that immigration white paper, but for the protection of domestic abuse survivors. And it also feels to me that at this moment, I don't necessarily see outside of the immigration sector the appetite of civil society organizations in holding government accountable. I mean, one of the manifesto commitments was about halving vote in 10 years. And the question that I've been putting forward since the government came into office has been for who? I mean, migrant women are not going to be touched by the vote strategy, for example, by this comprehensive, very long plan that the government put forward in order to uphold that manifesto commitment. Migrant women are not going to be touched in a positive way by that strategy. With the increase of surveillance techniques, of the use of technologies, of, you know, even the prevention aspects have some really complicated and very harmful proposals as we're going to start surveilling children to be able to detect potential harmful behaviors that can lead to violence against women and girls. We know what this is going to do. It's going to be a step towards the criminalization of Black and minoritized communities in this country, because this is how surveillance always works. But the question for me has always been, okay, so there's a commitment to have vogue in a decade. There's a strategy that's been put forward. In the priorities of things, the immigration white paper came like over half a year before the vogue strategy came forward. But I'm not necessarily seeing that there is a very robust movement into saying, okay, so yes, I'm a migrant. Yes, I mean, this is not going to be really easy for me, but this is still my government that needs to be held accountable to me. I'm a constituent as much as I am a migrant. I am a, you know, charity director as much as I am a migrant. And yet, I'm not necessarily seeing that we're organizing to say, so how, what are the mechanisms available to us? Some formal, you know, like going through MPs and other types of things. Some informal, like going to the streets and protesting. I know that there's a few marches that have been organized for the next few days, and I fully agree and support with that. But I think we need to change our mindset to say, this government is accountable to its citizens, of which we are part of, or to its constituencies or the populations that are already in the country, regardless of immigration status, because I don't think rights should be divided between citizens and not citizens. I think government are still accountable to populations. And I would really, really put in a rallying cry to start holding them accountable. And I think for that, we need to have a much wider analysis of saying, okay, so how do we link the failures of austerity to a narrative that has been fully embraced by this government that says it's migrants? It's the failures of this is because migrants are here. And therefore, we're going to be criminalizing migrants, and we're going to be deporting migrants and looking for new mechanisms to make their lives a lot harder. I mean, the significant extension of the timelines to earn settlement are going to create a really high amount of harm. It really will be making it a lot more possible for women to stay in situations of violence against women and girls, for women to even die in situations of violence against women and girls without being able to report to any authority that this is the reason. And this is the situation they have been experiencing. It's going to make a lot easier for anyone who seeks to exploit migrants to do so with impunity, and for perpetrators of abuse and other forms of violence to do so with impunity. And I think in this, it's impossible to say that because we are allowing migrants to come into harm because of the policies that are being put forward on earned settlement, or no recourse to public funds, and so on and so forth, that the government can say, oh, this is not our responsibility because they were not born here, right? What is the function of the state if it's not to be responsible for the population that inhabits that state? And I'm very, very sorry again for changing tack with this presentation, but just hearing on the other presentations, I think a lot has been said. But I really, really think that as we're going into discussions, we need to remember that there is so much more that we can do if we think this is not about, so this is not necessarily about whether or not we are deserving or not deserving. This is not necessarily about whether or not we're granted rights or not granted rights. This is not necessarily about living with the scraps that successive governments continue saying that we should live by. I think we need to take ownership of the power that we have, and we need to raise our voice and say, so stop checking my homework, let's check yours. How are you doing as a government? And what are we doing to demand you to be accountable to us, to others like us, to our friends, to our neighbors, to our co-workers, to the people that surround us, and say, let's change the narrative. And it has to be about accountability, and it has to be about the failures of successive governments to right situations that now are being placed on the shoulders of migrants. I think we need to go beyond what we're being told that we can do and what we can say, and into the power of being the ones who are going to be checking about how the delivery is being done by this government, by the previous governments, by successive governments. I'm just going to finish by saying, and I'm very sorry because this has been less structured than I would have liked, but it just keeps going on in my head. We need to hold them accountable. We need to really, really, really put the pressure on them to justify how these decisions are made, and to justify the calculations that make it so easy for them to leave entire populations in harm's way. Because one of the things, other than, kind of missing civil society more broadly organizing around some of these issues, is because I feel that now, there has to be some fear about being accountable for a lot of these decisions, and how far-right narrative has been embraced by the government, and how migrants have become a scapegoat. But I was, in this meeting last week where I was told, well, no, we're doing this to prevent a reform government coming in. And I'm sorry, because I should not talk about political parties. But that was the response that I got. We're doing this in order to prevent a reform government coming in. And then I was thinking, that is not enough reason. The way that these policies have been designed and the effects that they will have in the population, it will. A potential future government coming in will not negate the actual harm that is happening today to these women, to these survivors of both violence against women and girls and labor exploitation, to these victims of trafficking. It will not make a difference because the harm is being done today. So I don't think it's enough for us to allow these narratives to continue expanding on the basis that we're trying to prevent something worse happening. It might very well happen regardless of what we do or what we don't do. But I think we need to have much more clarity on what we are owed when we are here, what we are owed because of the, the histories of colonialism, the harm that has already been done. And to say, you know what, I reject that. I'm still your constituent and you're still accountable to me. So let's make that happen. And I apologize, this should have been better structured, but it's a reflection a little bit on what I've been hearing and what I think we need to discuss in the rest of the time.
Thank you, Gisela. That's fine. That's good, information to have. We are running quite far behind time, so I just want to introduce our last speaker, who already spoke at the beginning of the conference, so has a little less time to speak now. Halaleh Taheri, Executive Director of MEWSo. She was born in Iran, was part of the 1979 revolution that toppled the Shah of Iran, and later she fought against the Islamic regime, which, as she said earlier, is still in power. As a refugee, she was given asylum in Sweden, where she gained her degree, qualified as a social worker, and was politically active fighting for women's rights. She then moved to London and founded the Middle Eastern Women and Society Organization in 2010. Her section, I think, the topic that she's talking about is From Policy to Prejudice, Institutional and Social Racism Against Migrant Families. So you have the floor, Halaleh.
Thank you so much, Audrey. And I want to just reflect very quickly about the speaker's amazing speech. I will start with Zrinka. I agree with you with the solidarity more than ever. That's why we are with the solidarity, no border, side by side with you and your colleague. And Zrinka, it's really important. After this meeting, we all speakers and those people who are interested to meet up again and to planning for more work together. Gisela, me and you for years, we are in a campaign for Step Up Migrant Women, and I am proud of that we are working together. And the point that you bring it about white papers, if you remember, we had a demonstration. We weren't so many people. That's a question, why we are not so many people around this issue to challenge it. And why after that it wasn't more work on that, campaign around that, movement around that. We really needed to work on that. And that's, Dr. Nasreen, I really like this discussion about the fetus in the end that you bring it. That's exactly that I agree with you. That is one of the dangers that it will deep down we are facing in our communities today, and hopefully in future, maybe in another seminar, we can discuss it about that more. And also, as you say, the hostilities exist. That's why Sakia Sama, without no excuse, and clearly say that this island is full of strangers. I don't know anymore my country. And it wasn't a mistake. It was on purpose that he said that. And it will be more talk like that in future if we don't stand up strong against such a discussion that they did it. And Iris, I wanted to say that your case study is similar to those case studies that at MEWSo we are working with. Actually, the case studies like that is really important to be published widely in the society for those people who sometimes innocently, sometimes by mistake, they are standing with sometimes far right, thus not knowing that how much the migrant women, refugee bringing resources, knowledge, good things to this country, and then they can live together side by side. So those case study is really, really important. I will start with my personal story. I am a migrant as well. I was. And then I lived in 4 countries, ended in 5th country in the UK in a very hard time. Each move brought hope that, especially my journey was starting from Kurdistan after the revolution in Iran, 1979. And each time I faced it, glass ceiling, all the time. And it was all the opportunities, recognition, safety. It was all very limited for me every time when I tried for that. But luckily, I was resilient, and I fought back. I stood up for myself and for other people, as you know, that I built this organization. But many other women can't do that and couldn't. Many others are pushed into the shadow, silenced by fear, doubt, and the weight of the systematic barriers. Systematic barriers actually today is very heavy, very on the migrant people, especially migrant women. And this is exactly what I see happening in those families that we are working with. Policies do not exist in isolation. They influence attitudes, shape society, and seep into everyday life. For migrant families, especially women, recent policy environment have created a climate of horror. We can see that in our community, definitely in your community as well. Families face threats and warning from others, making it unsafe to live openly, to socialize, or even sometimes to speak their own languages in some places. Children are affected, parents are anxious, women are hiding, retreating deeper into their home. Sometimes those homes who are the abuse will start it. And then policies that describe migrants as an outsider, we know that, and or a risk for the society are not abstract. They are lived experience. They translate into suspicion, hostility, and sometimes even violence. Migrant women are particularly more vulnerable. We all talk about that. Many face domestic abuse or economic independency, yet restrictive policies make them afraid to report abuses. Questions dominate their thoughts, especially for the women. We're seeking help. Will seeking help affect my immigration status? For example, will the government will deport me? Will they take children from me? Will they believe me or not? And whether these fears are real or not, but exist among the community. We hear from our client, and we always encourage them that to be strong and then do not be disrupted by such a thought. So professionals often call the communities hard to reach about this kind of community, but they are not inherently hard to reach. They are hard to trust because the system has failed them. When fear and confusion dominate, withdrawal is survival, not choice, not the choice of those people. This is why understanding institutional and social racism together is so critical. Policies that create barriers enable social prejudice to thrive. Suspicion, hostility, and marginalizations follow. Migrant families are caught in a cycle of invisibility and vulnerability. Migrant women are increasingly withdrawing from support services, reporting very little incident, and seeking help less often. I just wanted to say here that I was in the last meeting in Islington DV Commissioning Group when they reported the evidence incident about the domestic violence. It was so little. And when I compared it with all the cases that we have, only we have, and I know that other organizations have so many, it was so little. And that was the evidence that how much those women are scared of the authority, scared of the police to report it. Migrant women are increasingly withdrawing from support services, reporting very little incident and seeking help less often. But withdrawal does not mean that the problem have disappeared. On the contrary, risks are hidden. Domestic abuse, mental health struggles, and family stress remains unaddressed. Children grow up unseen. Family navigate complex, hostile system alone. So what must change? This is really important. Communities need clear, accessible information about their rights and protection. Policies must be communicated in a way that people can understand them, in the language that they can understand, in the cultural understanding, services that is culturally based, and trusted community partnership, like me, like your organization. It would be trusted, it would be important for the authority to rely on such an organization. Women experiencing abuse must know that the seeking help will not put them at further risk. If you remember Gisela fighting for the safety before status, we work a lot with the Home Office to make this statement happen. Today, in 1 second, they get rid of all the statement, all the hope, all the work that we are doing. And that was one of the points that we wanted to help women not be scared to report it abuses. But the reality is that this list already is in table of the authority, stakeholders, and women organizations are working. We all are in connected with each other. We all in so many campaign and project and partnership, we are working together, but we are not a strong, big group at the moment. The authority still has the dominant of all the situation. So the truth is we need more than that. We need systematic change. We are facing a rise in far rights, which poses a significant threat to migrants and refugees. Are we ready to confront it? How do we organize our movement? And what should our priorities be at the moment? How do we connect with each other as an organization partner and campaigner? Do we have any other own alternative to represent it and work on that together? And how do we make it effective? I want to leave you with these thoughts. Behind every policy debate are real people, families, mothers, children, women struggling to survive while navigating systems that feel confusing and intimidating. When policies create fear and isolation, the most vulnerable pay the highest price. Today, migrant women are more hidden, more vulnerable, and more silenced than ever. I'd like to repeat that they are not hard to reach. They are hard to see because fear has forced them into the shadows. Our responsibility is clear. We must ensure that systems do not deepen invisibility. We must create safe spaces, like all of us talk in our discussion, in our speech, clear pathways, and trust. We must continue our fight together to make sure we do not lose these rights for migrants and refugees. The generations before us fought for years for this achievement that we are talking today, and by one, the authority they are taking from us. It is our duty to safeguard this achievement. Only then we can prevent the journey from policy to prejudgment, from controlling the lives of migrant family. Because resilience alone should never be a requirement for safety and dignity. Thank you so much. And I am hoping that more than ever during this time, we all meet each other to find our own solution, own campaign, own movement, and build it for a better, stronger work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Halaleh. That was really inspiring. And thank you for being quick too. So now I'd like to go to Aman, who has some testimonies, I think, for us. Aman?
Hi, I'll be sharing my screen, so bear with me a bit.
Just to say that Aman is MEWSo's project manager. Sorry, I didn't introduce you properly.
Thank you. Just lagging a bit, so bear with me. Can you see my screen now?
I think it's coming. Yeah, I can see it. Can other people see it? Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up.
Great. So, what I want to say is that the whole purpose of us sharing this case study is that reflecting as a grassroots organization, as service providers, on how all this amazing discussion can be applied whenever we have cases, and to really challenge the decisions of the government and the recent announcement by Shabana Mahmoud, the Home Secretary, recently, how they will guarantee that they will be, or how they will judge the temporary protection for the asylum seekers, the decision that took force and will be applied on any asylum seeker entering the country um, from now on. So, without any further ado, I'll move to my presentation, which was provided to me by our advisors. This case is by our DV advisor, Awatif, who provided it to me, and we will be reflecting on it together.
Sorry, Aman.
Yeah.
Are you still trying to share screen? Because I've lost it now, the shared screen.
Oh, let me try once more. Sorry. So it's not sharing?
It just disappeared on me.
Okay.
Ah, it's coming back.
Let me know.
Yes, there it is. I can see your whole desktop though. Yeah, no. Oh dear.
Can you see it now?
No, it's disappeared again.
Oh gosh. Uh,
Are you able to read it out if you can't share screen?
yes. Okay, so let's go by that. I'll give it another try.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, I'll read it because I'm very conscious of the time. Let's give it another try. Is it shared?
Coming. Desktop again. So we
Okay.
can stick with the desktop if that's as close as you can come.
Let's try once more. Can you see it now?
I can see the desktop, yes, yes, we can see it now.
Okay, full screen, right?
Yeah, I think so. There's a yeah. Okay.
Okay. As I said, this case was sent to me by our DV advisor, Awatif, and we want to try to think together collectively how, if this DV case arrived to the UK today, the 9th of March, with the new rules, how the government will be able to provide her protection with the current policies that they have announced a couple of days back. So when we talk about immigration policy, it can feel abstract, more into the procedure and administrative process. But for women we support, these policies, they shape their daily life. They basically shape their future. This case study in particular is about a lady. We will call her Muna for time being. This is not her real name. And we will try to see how the immigration system and gender-based violence basically intersect with each other in her case. So, Mona, before she was an asylum seeker, she was highly educated. She completed her master degree during 10 years of civil war. She had begun her PhD. She had basically a very successful life, and she was striving for a better future. In 2024, her family forced her into forced marriage. There was no legal visa route available to her at that time, so she was smuggled outside of her country. Usually, when safe and legal routes are closed, women do not stop moving. So we need to understand that people who comes on the boats at the end of the day, they don't come on the boats and risk their lives because they are liking to be sinking in the sea, or they like to come by sea for pleasure or for trip. There is no other route they can come to this country. There is no other option. And there is no legal routes. As I said, women do not stop moving. They move in dangerous way. Irregular migration is often the consequence of the restricted legal pathway. In Turkey, she moved by boat to Turkey. She had no residency documents. Her husband locked her inside the house for over 6 months. He was physically abusive and he forced her to have an abortion. And because she had no legal status at the time, she could not report the abuse safely. She could not leave the relationship independently, and the immigration insecurity strengthened at that time the abuser's control, which is something all the speakers spoke about, and Zrinka mainly at the beginning. So policies over here, the immigration policies became part of the power imbalance in this case in particular. She tried to escape to Bulgaria. On her first attempt, she was stranded at the border for 3 months in very harsh conditions. And on her second attempt, she entered Bulgaria, but was physically assaulted by authorities and detained in an unsafe refugee camp. And over here, I want to shed the light that even through the procedure of asylum seeking, from fleeing from country to another, you're getting abused all the time. You're getting abused by smugglers, if not sexually assaulted and raped in many cases. And then you're getting abused by the authorities. And if you're escaping an abusive relationship, you're getting abused. So it's a whole traumatic experience of continuous abuse, whether it is from home, from system, from smugglers, particularly for women and young girls. And that we're speaking about cases when there is no human trafficking involved. If there is a human trafficking, the abuse will be on a different level. She had no protection. She stayed in unsafe refugee camp, and the system prioritized the enforcement over her safety, as they usually do. While she was in Bulgaria, she entered a new relationship there. Her family considered this a dishonor for the family and start issuing death threats for her. So, with policy makers and the questions over here to the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmoud, when she speak about the safe return, in a case as such, how can she ensure a safe return for this case in particular? Based on what scale she will try to understand whether it is safe for our case over here, as we call it, Muna. It's safe for her to go back or not. Or safe for whom, to be honest? This is a question perhaps that we might ask. So, for women facing owner based violence, return can mean death to them. Her asylum claim in Bulgaria was rejected because her entry was registered there. She could not seek protection elsewhere in Europe. She was trapped in administrative system designed for efficiency, and this system can unintentionally or intentionally, let's say, trap women in unsafe jurisdictions. She traveled through 10 countries and finally reached the UK seeking safety. And usually this trip, they come on foot from East Europe till here. to France, and from France by boats to the UK. Since arriving, she has waited more than 8 months for a decision from the Home Office, and she has provided evidence of all the threats and legal risks that she has been facing, yet she remains in a limbo. Now, we must say that delays in this context are delays is not neutral, and uncertainty is not harmless. Every day of waiting counts. Her asylum applications require cross-referencing statement with her abusive husband, and he pressured her to change her testimony against him. Now, under the new 30 months review model, which was introduced to us 2 days ago, more women like her will have to repeatedly prove their fears to the Home Office almost every 2.5 years. Temporary protection can create permanent anxiety, bring back the trauma, and how to keep proving to the Home Office that you're still under the same abuse and the same threats. And how to do it when your safety become literally conditional. I also want to highlight something often invisible, the impact of the front line advisors. Our advisors had to repeatedly search government websites for updates and check the changing in rules that almost changing every other day at the moment, contact other organizations to clarify the new policies. That back and forth was stressful for our advisors who provide support, yet for Mona herself as well, who was already in severe distress because of her case. The lack of clear communication around these policies, the lack of information, and also the limited language access for service users, and the misinformation circulating in the community create a high level of confusion and fear for victims. Women often ask, why am I being rejected? Why am I ignored? It makes them feel that they are left behind, lonely, unwelcomed, afraid. Mona currently is receiving mental health support from MEWSo, but no counseling or emotional support can undo the systemic instability. So when we say our lives are not border policy, we mean that protection should not be conditional and safety should not be fragile, and that the dignity of women must be central. And this is a good way to end it here, to have an open discussion with all of you, hear your thoughts, perhaps your opinion. I guess we've got 15 minutes left. So if you can share some cases, some thoughts, and also if you have a lot of questions or things would you like to pop it on the speakers, this is the chance. So I'll stop sharing here, and I'll give you open space to reflect on that.
Do we have any other last minute questions? Any last minute comments that people want to make? Because if not, it's 27 past 1. We're 3 minutes early. I mean, that's a shocker considering where we were. So thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful to hear your contributions and really lovely to see you all. And I hope that we can all stay in touch, just to sort of, keep on top of all of this horrendous policy stuff going on. It's just ridiculous. So thank you again. And if you want to leave anything else in the chat box, I will grab it now. Emails, comments, I will grab it now and keep it so that we've got it as a record if we need to get back to you or anything.
Thank you to everybody. Yeah.
And when I get the recording, hopefully I will get it and we can put it up on YouTube as well. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.